I'll start introducing people. So we have Boaz Seufer, CEO of BayWa RE Solar Systems. We've got Corey Garrison, the CEO of South Base Solar. We've got Evelyn Butler, Senior Director of Codes and Standards with SEIA. Vikram Agarwal, CEO and founder of Energy Sage. We got David Chang, Senior Director, Head of Sales for Solar Energy Storage for LG Electronics. Stephen Trimble, Founder and CEO of Arctic Solar Venture. Karen Paramanadam, she's the Sales and Marketing Program Manager at Unirac. David Dunlap, VP of Operations. And did I get everybody? I think I did, yeah. So Crystal will start putting everybody away again, and we'll bring them up as we have questions for them. And Frank Jessel as well, the head of Global Solar Distribution for BayWa RE. I think I missed him up on screen, but Frank will be joining us first. So as I said, we're going to bring guests up as we have questions for them, and I'd like to hand it over to Boaz, our CEO, who's done a great job of piloting us at BayWa RE Solar Systems for the last couple of weeks in this tough time. He's going to say a few words about what's on his mind. And I also want to add that this is Boaz's 10-year anniversary with BayWa. So congratulations, Boaz.
Thanks, Tom. This year alone feels like 10 years so far. So yeah, first of all, thanks everybody for joining us. Tom asked me to talk about what's on my mind this week. And honestly, earlier this week, a lot of what was on my mind was a little darker than it had been. In particular, the news that came out of the federal government earlier this week about, projected impacts from Corona. The economic news seems to be getting a little bleaker this week. So I wanted to focus on silver linings and some of the things that we're talking about in BayWa RE that I imagine some of you are seeing also. But I think it's extremely valuable to see the opportunity that's emerging as we all deal with the COVID-19 crisis. The first silver lining that I just want to call attention to is innovation. And I think we're only starting to see that. I think over the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to see a lot more innovation. And I'm talking about innovation at a really large scale. I mean, just all the schools transitioning to online learning or supported homeschooling is requiring a lot of innovation. But of course, we're seeing innovation in the solar industry in some new ways also. I think for us, one of the most interesting aspects of that is organizational innovation. So we had been talking about reconfigurability as a capability that we wanted to have for a while. And this crisis is really testing our ability to suddenly stand up a reconfigurable organization. And within 2 weeks, essentially we shut down the executive team, some of our leadership teams, quite a few of the projects we were working on, and stood up a COVID response team and 3 COVID work streams on financial health, on staying close to our customers, and on taking care of our people, right? So being able to reconfigure in a really short period of time was amazing, and that's a capability we want to take forward with us. Also, really practically, how we're managing pipelines with our customers and predicting their inventory needs and working with them is creating opportunities that I think are going to translate into potential automations pretty soon here, where we're gathering pipeline information and automating order planning, essentially. And you guys, customers, solar contractors are learning how to sell online. Inspectors are learning how to do inspections by FaceTime in a variety of places. All of those are just the beginning of kind of what I think is a wave of digital transformation in solar. So I think there's incredible opportunity there. I think another thing worth mentioning is solar or renewable energy might be incredibly well supported coming out of this crisis. And initially, I'm referring to kind of the work that's happening in the stimulus package that is now being negotiated. But there are things like ITC extension, a reintroduction of the 1603 tax grant, some relaunch of the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act that followed the 2008 financial crisis. That's really aimed at infrastructure development using American companies and American resources. And often in recessions, infrastructure and energy get investment. So I think there's some great opportunity there for us in the midterm. And then I think social transformation is probably the most interesting and most important outcome of this. And that's not a business statement, but really what I've seen in how people are connecting with each other, finding interesting ways to connect with each other. One of our employees organized a happy hour on Zoom. I'm sure many of you have done that already by now. We might all shave our heads over the weekend on Zoom together because nobody's getting out for a haircut anytime soon. So really, this connecting with each other is happening at an incredibly high level, and that's really gratifying to see. And I think that's transforming us socially. The very fabric of our society is transforming, and we're coming together for a greater purpose. And that does have an impact for renewable energy too, and for mitigating climate change, and for rebalancing our relationship between economy and ecology, which I think is what a lot of us are here for. So I thought I'd start out on an optimistic note. And thank you again so much for being here. It's an honor, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Boaz. So now I'd like to talk about the global perspective a little bit. And to do that, I'd like to bring up the head of global distribution for BayWa RE. This is Frank Jessel, and he's dialing in from Germany. Can we get him up on screen? Let's see. Great, there you are. Hi, Frank. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, or good evening in Germany.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for letting me be part of that great idea.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So can you give us a quick overview? How many BayWa RE distribution entities do you oversee? And what are you most focused on right now as head of global distribution?
Sure. So we have currently 18 distribution entities, respectively sales offices around the globe. We employ around 450 people, which is quite significant in terms of distribution. We are divided into 3 regions: EMEA, where we have the strongest footprint, followed by Americas. And luckily, I have great managers like Boaz Seufer, who is on that call, who is also running Canada and Mexico for me. So that's great support. And then we have also the last region, Asia Pacific.
Great. So BayWa has a distribution company in Italy and Spain, and they've both been very hard hit. Can you talk us through some of the challenges our sister companies are facing around the world right now? And are there any lessons that we might take from their experiences?
Yeah, definitely. But let me go back first to the first question because it was not completely answered. So what am I focused on mainly, because it's really crucial for our employees and also for our customers to hear. It was actually people, liquidity, and supply chain. And that's actually, it happened in that order. So we take people very seriously. Our employees make the difference. So safety first. We put a lot of effort in providing our employees with the safest possible working environment. Luckily, we have invested very early in digitizing our infrastructure. So most of our colleagues can work from home. You know, it's a very American thing. Actually, in Europe, it's not that common. It is now, as it was a learning curve for us here in Europe, definitely. It's also very important to reassure our staff and everyone around us that they have a safe job, right? So that was what I was concentrating on first. Liquidity In general, we are in a very strong position, and we have a strong balance sheet, but nobody knows how long that crisis is going to last. So even we have to model, and we have to have different scenarios in place in order to make sure that we stay in that position. Last point was actually supply chain. So you have to imagine we're carrying way more than 100 million euros of inventories around the globe. So that's very crucial to have the right level of inventory to make sure our customers have what they need. And of course, we carry a certain risk with it because nobody knows how demand is going to develop.
Great. So can you talk about some of the challenges those companies are facing right now, and any lessons that are coming up for you from those experiences?
Yeah, sure. I mean, your question was in specifically about Italy and Spain, and we definitely were hit the hardest in Europe, and specifically in those two countries. So in Italy, it was just astonishing, and we experienced such a rapid change in circumstances, and it was extremely difficult for our Italian colleagues in particular to adapt to the constantly changing environment. So, from basic home office rules to a complete shutdown within weeks, that's also mentally a huge challenge. And we must not forget that we are talking about human beings that also have families and friends, and they also have to get adjusted to their private lives. And homeschooling alone can be very challenging. Boaz pointed it out himself, and I speak out of experience because I have 3 kids myself. And just to get used to the new situation is very challenging. But the same is true, actually, again, it's people, customers, liquidity, and supply chain. Those are the major takeaways, what our installer base actually can learn from it. So for instance, initially we were overwhelmed with demand, right? So we had a huge pipeline, in particular in Europe. Customers were booked up till June or July, right? And all of a sudden they were afraid, and there was not only panic buying about toilet paper, actually there was also panic buying in terms of PV components. So that was something we had to make sure our customers are getting it, and I can only urge everyone in the industry to make forecasting, to make sure that your partner knows about your demand and you communicate that as early as possible. Yeah. What also what was very interesting to see, that people never expected the worst, right? They always adopted to very reactive to the next level of restrictions. And I guess you have to have scenarios in place and just expect the worst and have a solution for that occurrence in order to make sure that you're not running into huge difficulties.
Right.
What is also very helpful, and I love your website, and I guess that's very crucial for our customers and business partners to understand how to apply for loans. What's the process behind it? You hear so much on the news, but if you go down and want to find out specifically what needs to be done, then sometimes it's really you're helpless. And we have some certain rules in Spain, for instance. You're not allowed to lay off people. What does that mean? How can we make sure not to have to lay off people? Do we get government grants? Do we get subsidies? In Germany, you cannot file for insolvency. Okay, that's a new rule. How is it implemented? What does it mean? So it's very important that we help our customers during those extreme times and help them educate themselves.
Right. Yeah, I think one thing that came out from what you said was that communication between distributors and their partners. There's a lot of help that BayWa can offer our partners in how to navigate this time. In Europe, supply chain concerns seem to have diminished in a lot of ways. You have unique visibility into the global renewable energy space. What's your feeling at a high level? Is renewable energy well positioned to come out of this crisis?
Yeah, that's very true. So we currently see hardly any backlogged products anymore in Europe in particular. In my opinion, we're going to find ourselves in an oversupply situation by June, July. I know there's some vendors or manufacturers on that call. They might to differ about that, but I believe that we are not focused, and our customers also are not focused enough on sales beyond June, July, and they're not talking about pipeline. They're more concerned about finishing the jobs at hand and to basically install all the orders they have in their books already. So if you look at a global perspective, you look at 157 gigawatt roughly of capacity. And the predictions in terms of global demand vary from 105, which is pretty low, to let's say 140, but definitely nobody talks about an undersupply. When we are going to hit that scenario and that situation, it needs to be seen, but I believe in July we're going to have a massive oversupply, depending a bit on the region and a bit on the manufacturer. But definitely there might be some pressure on pricing again, and that's something we have to take into consideration. I believe definitely we are in the right industry. Energy is so important, and the positive facts about renewable energy, they remain the same, right? We still have an environment to protect, and there, as also Boris pointed out, there's going to be so many subsidies and grants and programs to enable us to conduct business. So I'm actually pretty optimistic for the end of this year, and definitely I believe we're going to have an amazing next year, and we're going to recover next year. And of course, that's very much true, in particular if we found by then a vaccine, and people can feel safer at home and outside.
Yeah. Great. Well, Frank, I know you have to run. Thank you so much for sharing that global perspective with us. Just one last question. Out of all the distribution companies you manage around the globe, and there are quite a few, are we your favorite?
That's a good one. You put me on the spot. I can only have wrong answers here, but I have to say, I was always the favorite of my mother, and she expressed that also. My siblings hated me for it, and I learned a lesson not to say, but you're definitely doing an outstanding job, and you're amazing guys.
Okay. Thanks for taking the time, Frank. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Okay, great. So I'd like to bring up David Dunlap right now. David is going to give us the operational status update for BayWa. David, thanks for joining us. Please take it away.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we've been posting on our website, we are still 100% operational. All of our warehouses are 3PL operated, and most of them have a variety of other products and services in their area, most of which are still up and operational. So and our freight carriers, we work with national and regional carriers. They're also still up and running. So and as Boaz has mentioned, and you have mentioned, Tom, all of our staff is connected digitally and able to work 100% remotely. So we're open for business. We're here to help and support and satisfy demand wherever it can be recognized and realized according to those health and financial choices that each of us is making.
Great. Thanks, David. And David's going to stay on the line if you have other BayWa operational questions, and he'll be joining our conversation later with David Chang from LG. I'd like to bring it back to the US right now. We have a solar contractor joining the conversation now, and this is Corey Garrison from South Face Solar in Phoenix, Arizona. Corey, nice to see your face. I believe you're muted, but thanks for joining us today. Nice, we can hear you. What's the update from Phoenix? How are you guys doing? Are you still installing?
We are installing. We've put a lot of emphasis into our site safety plans, incorporating COVID-19, basically cognitive exercise of what happens if someone's exposed, how do we sanitize the area, how do we cordon it off. We've implemented a lot of OSHA guidelines to not only protect our people, but the customers that we're working around. So we've really focused on updating our site plans and what can we do to ensure our customers are safe and that our employees are safe ultimately. Then I find that by having those meetings and then walking people through a process that we've thought about and put a lot of effort into, that it empowers them a little bit more to feel safe on job sites. So we also have a no contact, no entry order, so we don't go into homes.
Okay. What's demand look like there?
Sales have fall down. We've had a lot of contract signing cancellations. I do see we will still get sales, but it's definitely slowed down for us on the sales side. Installations, our pipeline, we had a pretty long build out at this point. So we're kind of working through that while we navigate the waters of how to increase sales, or even how do we digitize that conversation. One of the things we're trying to do on the sales front is get our sales staff. One, we've authorized, if they feel comfortable, to have an outdoor meeting, patio meeting, driveway meetings, but again, we're not going into homes, and we're recognizing the social distancing, at least minimum of 6 feet with no touching. Also, how do we integrate a digitized conversation, a webinar, Zoom, Skype, which way is the best? And we're finding that most people have a lot of different avenues for that. So we're working through that. I don't think there's a best in class. I think we have to find what works for our customer. Right. And so that's what we're trying to utilize.
Great. Thanks for the update from Phoenix, Corey. We appreciate it. And Corey's going to stay on the line if you have any questions for him. So now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about data. And joining us, we have Vikram Agarwal, the CEO and founder of Energy Sage, one of the largest solar online marketplaces. Vikram's a regular guest on our podcast and at our annual Business Leadership Summit. Good to see your face, Vikram. How are you doing?
Likewise, Tom. Thank you for having me on the podcast, on the town hall today.
No worries. We're used to podcasts. This is a new thing for us.
Yeah.
So I'd like to do a little bit of a rapid fire with you. I'd like to talk to you about what you're seeing on the Energy Sage platform, and we can dig in a little bit more during the Q&A as well. But what are the interactions on the Energy Sage platform telling you? Are there any surprises there?
Yeah, sure. So we keep very close eye daily. We are looking at our traffic, our registrations, which is people signing up to get quotes, very, very closely. So I think about 3 weeks ago, when kind of the first stay-at-home order came at the federal level, that week was definitely one of the biggest impacts that we have seen in terms of organic traffic, decline in organic traffic, and decline in consumer engagement. It was definitely not a welcome number. We were down. I think we are down still. Actually, if there was something of a surprise, I would say there is a little bit of a pleasant surprise. And why I would say that is we were fully expecting that consumers are going to pull back. Solar is a big ticket item, and these are uncertain times. So we were fully expecting that maybe the numbers are going to be worse, but the numbers were not as bad as could have been. So I think we saw in the teens decline in terms of traffic and registrations. Over the last couple of weeks, we have started seeing an uptick in both the traffic and people signing up to get quotes. And in this week, we are actually seeing double-digit increases week over week from that perspective. So again, there are good signs. I think the good and the bad here, I think, is that the solar, like every other industry, I think is maybe moving more online than it has in the past. I think solar industry has been very much a in-person, face-to-face prospecting and sales process, while the consumer now, of course, is less open to those possibilities. So they are definitely, I think they have time. People are still interested in solar. I think just to Frank put it really, really well. So I'm going to parrot him that this is the right industry for us to be in. 40% of American households are interested in solar or have seriously given thought to installing solar. So right. Plenty of interest out there. And based on our site, our organic traffic, we are not advertising to get these people. These people are actively searching for solar right. and finding Energy Sage. So very excited to see that things are, after a very strong dip, third week of March, and starting to see.
Right. Yeah. I was going to ask a demand question, like, what are you watching for to see when demand's coming back? But it sounds like it already is. I'm wondering, are those quotes converting to sales is another question, or just people at home online shopping essentially right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So usually, what we see sales cycles to be anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks for a good majority of sales that go through. In these times, what we're finding is consumers are still engaging with our energy advisors, with our installers, they're reviewing their quotes, but decisions are taking longer. I think there is the good news here is people are saying they remain interested in solar, but before they make a final decision, they want to see some economic stabilization,
Right.
and that's where we all know the amount of trillions of dollars the federal government has already put in and is planning to now put in even more. As that starts hitting the economy, we can see those decisions now accelerating.
Right. That's great. That's good news for our industry. I'm happy to hear you say that. One more question before I let you go. I know you're not a macroeconomist, and this is an unprecedented time. And I'm going to ask you a big question. I'm hoping for a quick answer. But is there anything that you can share with us about how industries weather during recessions? If we are looking at a recession or a long downturn, which industries tend to bounce back faster and why?
Holy cow. Okay. Let me not try to answer that question because that would make me an economist and a very wealthy person if I could do that. But I think I'm very excited about the solar industry. I think partly because the consumer interest is there, consumers are going online, and any company that can now, I think as Corey mentioned, they are trying to learn how to go digital. If you can learn how to engage the consumer now while they have the time to pay attention and evaluate, maybe the decision is delayed by a few weeks. But if you can now prime that pump so that when the decision time comes, that you are there and filling the pipeline for the future. So very excited about where we are. But we have to plan, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for taking the time, Vikram. We appreciate it. And Vikram's going to hang out if you have questions on the data side or anything else for him. We're going to bring up, let's see, we have Evelyn Butler now. And so many aspects of the solar industry, as we know, are shut down or slowed, and resources that might have been available are no longer available. But one thing that's gotten a lot of attention lately is permitting. And there's a lot of work being done by local jurisdictions to help to try and keep that part of the business running. And we're also seeing a lot of inspections done virtually as well. And on the permitting side, SEIA has done a great job of tracking and sharing various permitting resources. So we have on the line Evelyn Butler with SEIA. She's the Senior Director for Codes and Standards. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. And thanks to all the work you and SEIA are doing on behalf of the industry to help provide these resources. We really appreciate it. I'd like to ask you to give us a brief overview of the work you and your team are doing on the permitting front and how solar contractors can best make use of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Tom, to you and Boaz for inviting us to be part of the conversation. I think like many of you at BayWa and your contractors and customers, since all of this has occurred, we've developed a really highly targeted focus on trying to help members and industry manage through the entire crisis. And so we did develop a COVID-19 kind of focused webpage on our website where we're collecting and sharing information that we've also been able to collect and confirm and analyze. And there are two surveys on there that I think are of particular interest. One is a survey tracking, overall business and employee impacts, and that helps guide, our actions as well. But with respect to permitting, where we've really focused is trying to identify, which jurisdictions and municipalities continue to accept permit applications, continue to do inspections, and really continue to give the green light for solar to be installed and operating. And so right now, we've collected hundreds of lines of data about jurisdictions that can still accept permits, whether it's by mail or in person, by email or online. You'll also see if they're accepting virtual payments or if they're asking for folks to send in a check, for instance, if they're doing, design review appointments by phone or Zoom or some other method And then also, we recognize that because a lot of installers are trying to work through their queues and they're having those kinds of difficulties, we have those folks also sharing information with us about those challenges. And then what we're doing is reaching out to those jurisdictions directly to say, how can we help in terms of not just solar, but really for everything they're doing for construction, to connect them to an online payment resource, or to how to create an email alias, right, in order to accept permits applications by email, things like that. So, and we're trying to develop some guidance as well that we can share with other jurisdictions to say, here's how you can, quickly get through this process, because they also want to stay in business, if you will.
Yeah. And I've seen it's almost like a very robust Excel doc with a lot of different information being updated almost live, it looks like, about different jurisdictions and their functionality. So yeah, it's a great resource. In the first round I'd like to ask you a jobs question now, if you're able to share some data. The first round of jobless claims was about 3.3 million. We just saw today, I believe it's at 6.6 million. Do you have any sense of how the solar industry is being impacted as a part of that 6.6 million? We have had some difficult conversations with customers, making that balancing act of how long should I, try to keep my operations going at a loss, what's that balancing act, but wanting to keep people around for Q3 or Q4 potentially, when the solar industry does a lot of installing. So yeah, what can you share with us about, some of the results from your survey as it relates to jobs?
Sure. Happy to share what we have. And you're right, it is being updated pretty regularly. We ask folks, even if you've already completed the survey once, to keep completing it, because it gives us a live look at how things are continuing to progress. As some of the shelter-in-place orders get updated, or as different nuances are being added to those. We also want to see that impact. And unfortunately, DG is getting hit the most. I think what's happening there is we have a lot of companies, smaller companies that maybe 50 or less employees, where they're really trying to weigh, right, how to continue on through this, but at the same time keep their employees' best interests at heart. And obviously this last package, the CARES Act that was passed, helps provide, in general, some tools for businesses and some relief and aid. And so the difficulty is trying to decide, do I take advantage of that now, or do I wait, because likely some more industry-specific relief may be coming in the near future as Congress and the House start to look at more specific ways to help industries that are really affected by this. What we are seeing is, on average, respondents are reporting somewhere in the 25% in terms of layoffs and furloughs. Again, we think that's an immediate response to trying to help their employees take advantage of any aid or resources that are out there, particularly as different states, are waiving, wait times as far as unemployment, or if there's more ambiguity about future business, if there's an opportunity for them to go find other employment that's a little bit more stable in the meantime, but still allows them to come back. So I think, unfortunately, those are, some of the immediate actions that we're seeing. But our teams also, our federal and state teams, are also working pretty tirelessly to try and develop other more focused aid and relief for us, with respect to, relooking at the ITC, how can we reinvigorate our efforts to get that extended? In what form should that take place? Would direct payments instead of the tax credits be more helpful to organizations in the short term so that they can continue on with business? There's a lot of different ideas and angles to that. And, we're still really interested in getting, the industry and companies' inputs on that, what can help them through this immediate short time, so that we can really fight for that on the Hill or in the different states as we can.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time. I love your background, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So are you able to stay on the line to answer any questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Karen. We appreciate it. And thank you for all the work SEIA is doing.
Sure, you're welcome.
I'd like to bring up our representative or our partner from UNIRAC now. We have Karen Paramanandam, and she's going to talk about some of the partner tools. We talked a little bit about permitting earlier. And Karen, hi, thanks for joining us today. Can you please tell us about what UNIRAC is offering in terms of permitting?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me on today. For those of you who were at the Leadership Summit a few weeks ago when all of this madness happened, we mentioned that that UNIRAC has rolled out a permitting program. It's not widely publicized as of yet. We're really rolling it out in a very strategic way. Of course, BayWa is one of the partners that we're going to be doing this with. And, we thought that this would be, with the current situation, this would be a great way for us to be able to help customers succeed in the marketplace. As Evelyn mentioned, these are challenging times. And so a lot of companies are rolling back, their back office staff, or they're perhaps, have limited availability or possibility to actually create permit packets and permit plan sets for their jobs. And so this is all one of the ways that UNIRAC, we think that we can help. So we've been invited to do a webinar on the subject on Monday, and we're really looking forward to it. But yeah, so the program we've been doing permitting, as I said, at a sort of a very limited basis with very key partners around the country. We've been testing it out for a little over 18 months now, and with a very high success rate. And so I know there's a lot of partners already that we do this program with around the country, but very specifically, this is something new that we're going to roll out with BayWa. So
great.
Open to questions. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you're going to hang on the line for us too. And that webinar will be Monday. Do you know what time that starts?
Yes, I actually have it. I think it's at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's, let's see, I just have it's on Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you'll have Sai Upu and Robert Fulbright, who run our permitting program team here in Albuquerque, delivering that webinar.
Great. And folks can go to solar-distribution.com and find out more about that offer. Thank you for talking with us today, Karen. We appreciate it.
Not a problem.
So now I'd like to talk to another solar contractor. We have Stephen Trimble from Arctic Solar Ventures, which to me sounds very cold and somewhere where I'm not necessarily going to want to be on the roof. How you doing, Stephen? Thank you for joining us.
Doing well, Tom.
So I hope you're not frozen,
Sure.
But I think maybe I have a little bit of a connection issue. There you go. So yeah, how's it going up in Alaska? Is the contractor business up there following a similar trajectory as the lower 48?
It is in a lot of ways. I think we had kind of an unusual situation where we had a late spring with an extended snow season that sort of coincided with the beginning of this crisis. So our field teams were already out of the field at that point because we had heavy snows to deal with. And so I think it sort of gave us a little extra time to prepare us for this remote transition that we're in now.
Interesting. Are you seeing projects being canceled or pushed out? What are you finding?
We're not seeing projects canceled yet. What we are seeing is probably a little uptick in initial customer interest. And so we're seeing more customers coming in thinking about solar as a resiliency solution. On the residential side, that self-reliance piece is very strong. And we try to direct a lot of our marketing materials that way. And on the small commercial project side, we're seeing a lot of business owners wanting to take their monies out of volatile markets and place them in something that's stable and long-term, like solar.
Interesting.
And so those are, I think, those sort of silver linings that we see. The one thing that we do see that's sort of on the negative side, and I think it's largely related to noise primarily, is that we're seeing a lot of customers verbally commit, and then we send their contract for signature, and then they're hanging on to their contract for a while due to just kind of all the international noise and uncertainty right now.
Are you, were you doing door-to-door sales before? Were you doing virtual sales? Any plans to change that?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of virtual already. So that allowed us to sort of bolster that side of our business and grow it and really sort of push ourselves to innovate in that direction. And so what we've been doing is very early on, because we're members of the Amicus Solar Cooperative, we had kind of boots on the ground news and information from our other co-owners around the country of sort of what was happening in some of the hot spots for this pandemic. So we responded very early and shut our office down to be completely remote 4 weeks ago. And so, and then we published guidelines for our COVID-19 response online as quickly as we possibly could. And we kind of lead every customer interaction with that. So we talk about social distancing. We talk about the altering of some of our protocols to being remote. We use Zoom a lot. There's still a good portion of customers that want to communicate via phone, and that works as well. What's nice about Zoom is that if you're sort of reviewing a proposal with a customer, you can even work on design revisions with them while you're sharing your screen and live. And if you sort of have a techie customer, like opening that door to them to allow them to see that, I think is a pretty powerful tool, which even if we were doing that, pre-COVID-19, we wouldn't even have access to that type of interaction, unless we were using Zoom in such a way already. So I think that can sort of be a powerful tool that we can explore further.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that perspective. We appreciate it.
Be
well up there. Thank you. Okay, so for the final part of our program, I'd like to bring up our next guest. We have David Chang, the Senior Director and Head of Sales for Solar Energy and Storage at LG Electronics. BayWa is a longtime partner of LG, and we're in continual conversation with David and members of his team, but it's great that we can have you on and talk directly with our partners today. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for having me, and thanks for giving me an excuse to get out of my robe.
Nice. Yeah. Some of us are doing the same thing as well. So you have a unique perspective on what's happening in the U.S. right now. What insights can you share with us? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've been kind of talking to all of our installers, or as many as we get to. What we're seeing overall is kind of, 25% of the installers that we see out there are kind of, temporarily shut down, or some of them may be permanently shut down. And of those, balance of 75%, I think they're kind of running at a 50% rate in terms of sales. Now, installations is still kind of ongoing because they're fulfilling pipelines that they've kind of sold maybe towards the end of last year or early Q1. But sales has definitely slowed down.
Yeah. Boaz talked last week about how we need to confront the brutal facts right now, and we're hearing some positive signs. But what are you hearing about the impact coronavirus has had on residential solar, immediate impacts, and what are we seeing in the coming months? What's your perspective?
Yeah, for us, we're already planning kind of a 50% kind of a downward trend for Q2. And obviously Q3, it's really hard to predict right now, but I think we are baselining a 25% decrease in our forecast for Q3. But anybody that's 100% sure of what's going to happen in Q3, either don't know what they're talking about or are just fooling themselves.
Yeah. The solar industry is constantly changing. There's a ton of complexity. And I like to think that we're a very resourceful kind of industry. What are you seeing in terms of some of the innovation that's happening with solar contractors out there? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's the silver lining is, I think, there's definitely a lot of evolution towards remote selling, and it seems like it's been fairly successful. We're still trying to get some more data points from various installers, but it seems like remote selling has been successful for some. I think that's, in the long term, I think it's going to really help us in the U.S. Solar industry to help reduce kind of a soft cost, right? Which has always been a big problem in the U.S. Solar industry. So when you talk to Frank earlier, and when you look at kind of the system cost difference between the EU and the U.S., it's tremendous, and most of that is based on the soft costs. So anyway, I think I think this is going to benefit us in the long term in terms of reducing kind of that soft cost.
Yeah. Vikram talked about some data that's coming through on his website that shows some positive trends. Are you at LG seeing anything positive on your website?
We are actually. It's kind of surprising. When I first saw the presentation or the slide deck from our VP of marketing, I was kind of shocked, but it's understandable because people are kind of sitting at home and maybe they're curious. And so we are seeing a huge increase in our traffic on just our LG.com site for solar. So I've written down some numbers for you so I don't misquote here. But we're seeing traffic on a year-over-year basis. So year-to-date, year-over-year basis, up 46%. For when we just look at the short term, the current week versus same period of 2019, we're seeing almost a 30% increase. And the customer, what we're seeing is that the customer engagement seems to remain very, very high. But the issue is that there's like a lack of purchase motivation right now. So we're looking at different ways where we could kind of drive some of that motivation, whether or not it's through a sales promotion, kind of a rebate directly to the homeowner, or a gift card that allows them to kind of purchase LG products on our e-commerce platform. Those are some of the things that we're looking at, and we're also tracking a lot of blogs. We're looking at Reddit, and it's kind of interesting what people are kind of talking about, right? One of the biggest hot topic is financing. People are kind of scared about putting such a big investment in right now when there's a concern about the economic impact from COVID-19. So financing is a big hot topic, and interestingly enough, the second biggest topic that people are kind of blogging about is quality installs. So I thought that was kind of noteworthy.
Quality installs, you mean how the quality of their install actually was?
Or yeah, it is going to be kind of during this crisis, right? I mean, there's
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, with installers, with limited crews, perhaps. I think they're a little bit concerned about how their quality is going to be when they're installing during this time period.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of some data that we've gathered on the traffic side. On the lead side, last week we kind of recorded an all-time record, 264 leads. And that's about an 86% jump over the same time period of last year. And of the leads that we are able to track, and we're not able to track a lot of all the leads, but of the leads that we are able to track, we're seeing a close to 28% close rate. So some silver lining there. Okay,
great. I want to wrap up with you, but we had a question come in from Laura about supply chain. She asked, when do you expect we will see the greatest impact of the module market as a result of factory downsizing, closures, and other delays related to COVID-19? China appears to be up and running normally, but her concerns are about the rest of Southeast Asia, especially in Q3, Q4, or 2021. What are your thoughts?
I think it's really hard to say right now. Obviously most of the imports that's coming into the U.S. is from Southeast Asia. And the imports from China mainland has been decreasing, and it continues to decrease. Right now, I think, they have kind of stay in place or shelter in place orders in all the major kind of Southeast manufacturing hubs in Vietnam, in Malaysia. But our understanding is that, most of the manufacturers there have exemptions. And, it's hard to say how long that's going to last for, to be honest. But I think I agree with, Frank's earlier comment. It's hard for me as a manufacturer to say that there's going to be an oversupply. But I think, his opinion that there might be an oversupply coming in July is, I think there is some basis to that. So right now, I think we're still seeing, plenty of supply, and I don't think anybody should be too worried about that from an installer level.
Great. We appreciate your perspective. On the more personal side, how are you holding up? Are you staying connected with friends and family?
Yeah. I we do a lot of Zoom. The kids do a lot of Zoom, but it definitely makes me appreciate the teachers out there a lot more. So I think, just yesterday, Governor Newsom, I live in California, Governor Newsom announced that, most likely they are not going to go back to school for the rest of this school year. So that was, my wife and I think, drank a bottle of wine after hearing that news.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, good luck. We appreciate you taking the time, David.
Sure.
All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Okay. So as we wrap up the main portion of this town hall and get to any final questions, Boaz, I'd like to hand it over to you for some final closing thoughts.
Thanks, Tom. It's really interesting how different the tone is this week compared to last week, just in terms of the industry getting traction on innovation. The news from Evelyn about how AHJs are adapting and how solar contractors are adapting in terms of selling online is really encouraging. And I think we're going to see a lot more evolution and innovation in the coming weeks. So I'm excited about that. I also want to just repeat, I'm really honored to be here with all of you. The sense of community that we feel together now is really inspiring. And I'm excited about carrying that forward with us. And I want to remind all of the solar contractors on this call that we're here for you. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, we will do our best to do it. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I think that's it for me. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Boaz. And as we say goodbye, I'd like to bring up our guests once again, the ones who were able to stick around before we get to our last segment. So I want to thank, David Chang, Vikram Agarwal, Frank Jessel, Evelyn Butler, Corey Garrison, Stephen Trimble, and Kara Paramanandam for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And some of these guests will be hanging out for Q&A if we do have questions. And then, I'd like to hand it over to Krista Riggle. She's one of the producers on our show. And she's also a Zoom expert. She's learning all the ins and outs of Zoom in the background. So if you see people pop up when they're supposed to, that's Krista doing her job perfectly. And if they don't, I guess that's her fault as well. Great power, great responsibility, Krista. Last week we talked about some of the things that people could do on the front lines out there. When I start my video, can't even see me. Hi, Krista. Krista, we talked about what people could do on the front lines for those working on the COVID crisis last week. Krista, I think you're going to talk about some mindfulness stuff for this week. What can you share with us?
Yeah, so last week we talked about the best things that we can do for the front lines are, one, trying to keep ourselves healthy. So doing the things that the CDC, everybody is recommending: social distancing, wash your hands, all of those things. But at BayWa, we also talk a lot about health, not just physical health, but mental, emotional, psychological health. Health has been one of our 6 core values since, I don't know, Boaz, since the beginning of your time here 10 years ago, I would assume. So we talk about a lot of those different aspects. And I want to dive in a little bit to the emotional, mental, and psychological health portion of it, because during times of stress, that mental, physical health can kind of go out the window. That active self-care can kind of go out the window because we're so busy focused on what's happening in front of us. So I want to remind everybody to not forget to take care of themselves. There's a phrase out there that you can't fill from an empty cup. So as leaders within the industries, or, just people within like families and communities out there, if we're empty ourselves, we can't really support the others that need it. So I want to make sure that everybody is remembering to grant themselves the space to take care of ourselves, because it's beneficial for us and also those around us. So if you're new to self-care, some easy tips to get started. One of which is taking a break from reading the news if you need it, giving a little bit of distance from that, prioritizing getting enough sleep, connecting with your loved ones. So we've talked about that a little bit here, people doing FaceTime and Zoom and all of that. One of our coworkers, BJ Monger, actually celebrated his brother's birthday, his grandma's birthday, and his sister's engagement party over Zoom with his family because they couldn't be together. So there are still ways that we can connect even if we are physically distant from one another. Another thing that you can do in self-care is exercise. So maybe that's taking your dogs for a walk, a new shelter dog if you happen to get one since our last segment. You can practice yoga or whatever exercise feels good for you. And then another tip is to start a daily mindfulness practice. That concept can be a little bit foreign to people. So if you want help starting a mindfulness practice or want us to help keep you accountable, we are having one tomorrow that we're hosting. And a fun mantra that actually came out of our team this week that I think has been helpful. It's from Rachel Shapira, our new residential finance program director. But the mantra that she shared is, it's not perfect, it's not personal, it's not permanent. So I think that's been something that's been helping our team remind us that there's a light out there and we'll all get there.
Great. Thanks for that update, Krista.
Thanks, Tom.
And good reminder to take care and take some time to take care of ourselves. And it seems now more important than ever. And as Krista said, we're going to have a mindfulness session tomorrow morning at 8:30 Pacific time. You can go to solar-distribution.com to find out more. And the planning and permitting UNIRAC webinar will be on Monday. So you can go to solar-distribution.com to see that as well. And I believe most of all our questions have been answered. So I think we're going to skip the Q&A. So again, thank you all for attending today, and make sure to check out next week's town hall on Wednesday. Thanks, Boaz. Happy 10-year anniversary. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye.